Agency 3. Welcome to Agency 3. In this course, we will explore the duties an agent has to parties other than their client. We will also review the duties a principal or client has to their agent. Course Outline Chapter 1. Duties to others. Limited agency, clients versus customer, duty of honesty, fairness, disclosure, and reasonable care, prohibited conduct. Chapter 2. Principals, responsibilities, good faith, compensation, fair treatment of third parties, liabilities and consequences, indemnification. Course objectives. By the end of this course, you should be able to do the following. Explain the ramifications of limited agency. Understand the duties an agent has to parties other than their principal. Understand the duties a principal has to their agent. Limited agency. Limited agency, also referred to as dual agency, is not exactly a duty to others, but represents a twist on the duties of agency we discussed in Agency 2. If a broker wishes to represent both sides of a transaction, the only way to do so is through limited agency. Throughout the course, we may use the terms agent and broker interchangeably. Remember, a broker is the agent in a principal-agent relationship. The word agent is also used to describe a sales agent. A sales agent is the agent of a broker. While the inconsistent use of terms may be a bit confusing, a broker, agent, or sales agent all ultimately bear the same responsibilities and have the same duties to their clients. Assume a broker has a home listed. A potential buyer calls a broker using the number on the sign in the front yard of the home. The broker asks if the potential buyer is represented by an agent. When the buyer reports that they do not have an agent, the broker shows the home to the buyer. The buyer decides to draft an offer on the home and asks the listing broker to represent them. The listing broker already represents the seller. If the listing broker decides to represent the buyer as well, the broker will be representing both sides of the transaction. This is limited agency. Limited agency can also exist in the property management context. If a broker represents both the landlord and the tenant, they are representing both sides of the transaction. This is also considered limited agency. If a broker represents both sides of a transaction, it is impossible for the broker to uphold the fiduciary duties we discussed in Agency 2. As a reminder, the fiduciary duties an agent owes the principal are care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and confidentiality. Let's take the duties of confidentiality and disclosure as an example. A broker lists a home for a seller and represents the seller. The seller discloses to the broker that they are in financial trouble. If they do not sell a home quickly, the sellers may go into default on their mortgage, possibly resulting in foreclosure. Using the same scenario we mentioned earlier, a potential buyer contacts the listing broker, and the listing broker ends up representing the buyer. The broker is now a limited or dual agent. Using the same scenario we mentioned earlier, a potential buyer contacts the listing broker, and the listing broker ends up representing the buyer. The broker is now a limited or dual agent. The duty of confidentiality prevents the broker from disclosing the seller's financial information because such information could adversely affect the bargaining position of the seller. If a potential buyer knew the desperate condition of the seller, they may negotiate differently. The duty of disclosure to the buyer requires that the broker tell a buyer of the seller's financial situation. This information could possibly affect the buyer's bargaining position in the transaction, as they would then know of the seller's desperate situation. To summarize, the duty of confidentiality to the seller prohibits disclosure of the financial information. The duty of disclosure to the buyer requires a disclosure of the seller's financial information. The two duties are in direct conflict with each other. The broker simply is unable to honor both duties. Conflicts such as these are impossible to avoid in limited or dual agency situations. Because of the inherent conflicts, many states do not allow licensees to act as dual or limited agents. Utah does allow limited agency, but only with informed, written consent by both parties. Before entering into a limited agency situation, both principals in the transaction must understand the implications of limited agency. They must sign a document which explains the ramifications of limited agency. The document should explain that the agent or broker will not be able to disclose information regarding the other party to the transaction.